With shady butlers and a weird amount of candlesticks lying around, murder mysteries are all around us. But who is the best at writing them? Well, that's what my guest and I are going to try to find out this week as we dust for prints, interrogate a witness or two, and take two heavyweight contenders and see which one of them is going to make it out alive in Beyond the Manuscript's continuing series, Author Fight. But before we get to that good stuff, I need to introduce my guest. Joining me this week is a former biologist, school teacher, and now a science tutor. He is the writer of the DCI Warren Jones series. Here today to talk about mysteries and everything that they include, please help me in welcoming my guest today, Paul Gitsham. How are we doing today, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Cooper. Good to meet you.
Good. Yeah, it was great meeting you the other day at the Coventry Book Extravaganza. You and your signature straw hat were there. I was just really excited. I really wanted to pick your brain just kind of on not just your books, but kind of murder mysteries kind of in general. Last week on the show, we did thrillers, and I thought this would be just a great way to lead right into murder mysteries here. But first, before we get to all that cool stuff here, tell us about your stuff. Who is DCI Warren Jones and the books that follow?
Yeah, so DCI Warren Jones is a British police detective. He's star of 9 full-length novels plus 4 shorter novellas, and I've been writing him since about 2011, with the first one out in 2014. Basically, Warren is a detective chief inspector in a fictional Hertfordshire town called Middlesbury. He's a little different to some of his contemporaries. When I was writing the books, I was thinking I've got to make this character unique, and I came up with all sorts of weird stuff. I gave him, I took one of his legs away, which is fine. I mean, they've done. Galbraith has done that rather successfully, but to one of his eyes, and I thought, hang on a second. He could join the police under the Disability Discrimination Act, but he isn't going to be chasing down bad guys with one leg and one eye. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, I'm going to write him as a normal guy. And I decided to take a very controversial stance for the genre and made him happily married, which we all know is not normal in this.
It is not normal, yeah.
So I was not worried. He has no substance abuse problems. He's happily married, a very fussy eater, just like me. And
just a functioning member of society here, right?
Exactly. He passes what I call the Friday night pint test. You would go for a pint with him on a Friday night. But I was a little worried. I thought, well, people like him. And people were saying, what a refreshing change. And so like I said, he's been going for a good few years now.
Very cool. And so in that kind of sense there, so the murder mystery genre is just kind of packed to the brim filled with iconic characters. Now, you got your Sherlock Holmeses, another one that I can't think of off the top of my head here. But so in your mind, though, how do you create a character that, stands out from all the noise that are just kind of filling up the genre?
Well, like I said, that was the problem. I was very stressed about it. I'd got this idea for a mystery story, and I realised it could be a series. I wanted a character, and I did get quite stressed about it because I was looking at all these amazing characters that are out there. You got John Rebus, for example. You've got Michael Connelly's characters like Harry Bosch, all amazing characters who I love. But I didn't at the time feel I could write those characters. I didn't have the life experiences of some of these somewhat older authors have got. I didn't feel comfortable writing about a divorced character with drug problems and stuff. I would now. I think I'm not that I've had those life experiences, but that I've been writing long enough and reading enough that I'm confident to do it. But back then I was a little nervous, and that was where I was looking at Peter James and Peter Robinson, the late great Peter Robinson. They have 2 characters, Roy Grace and Banks, both of whom are, although they have their quirks and interesting backstory, are relatively normal blokes and probably do pass that Friday night pint test. And I thought, you know what, let's try and write something like that. And there are some who may say my books are thinly Warrior's a thinly veiled version of me. A degree of wish fulfillment. I mean, he's a puppy eater. Like I said, he's happily married.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel I could write about things like jazz and stuff, which Michael Connelly does with great authority. So I made him like what I like, which is cheesy 80s pop music. So yeah, he's roughly the same age as me, and in fact, as the books progress, they progress in real time. He gets older, and he moves from his 30s into his 40s, and so that was quite nice to sort of do that transition.
So speaking on just how to creating mystery books or mystery stories rather, kind of as a whole, what's your particular process? Do you do what a lot of people do where they start at the end and then work backwards with clues, or do you just kind of all right, where I'm going to set up some kind of very unique kind of murder, and now I have to also solve it with my characters along the way, and then fix it up on the second, third, and fourth drafts and stuff like that?
Like I'm that organised. No, I'm what's known in the industry as a pantser. I don't do huge amounts of planning. When I start, I mean, I have a premise. I'll always have a premise. I'll have a few what I like to refer to as Agatha Christie moments, which is where you break an alibi, or you twist, or that's what actually happened. I'll have a few ideas for key scenes I want, and sometimes there might be a theme in there as well. Occasionally, I mean, I've looked at books with far right extremism, which I really wanted to write that. So I've looked at books with issues with dodgy priests. I've had my ideas, and then I have character arcs, so I knew where my characters are going over time, and then it's a question of just putting it together and just diving in. And so when I start, I might only have a few lines and bullet points, really. I get going, but then I plan as I go along. And a lot of us actually who say, "Oh no, don't plan," and it's true, we don't start planning. But actually, if you look at the end at our planning document, which we've just been adding random ideas to as we've gone along, it's actually quite lengthy towards the end, and you plan as you go. I write out a sequence, which is not something that many people do. And then I have to move all the pieces back together at the end, a jigsaw. Which I do about 3/4 of the way through. I start putting everything together, and then I can identify gaps and say, right, well, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And also identify the stuff that needs rewriting slightly, because I decided to move that scene in front of that scene. That suddenly means they're talking about the forensics on something they haven't found yet. So I've got to pick up things like that. And that's my process, and it feels chaotic, and in many ways it can be a bit squeaky bum towards the end. You're thinking, am I going to do this? Now I've got the confidence to look back and say, hang on a second, I've done this 13 times now, and it's worked each time. So just trust the process and just dive in and go for it. And to be fair, I mean, I've not had that many false starts. I mean, I know some people have. They go on social media and say, just delete your 25,000 words because it wasn't working and it's gone. I've not really had that. I've got a couple of books where I've had to put them to one side, but I will go back to them. And that was, COVID was fun because I wrote a book that was set with dates and everything. And it was set in the present day, and it was set in 10 years previously. And the present day was going to be the summer of 2020, and he was like, right, this doesn't work anymore. So I'd written quite a big chunk of that, and I will go back to that at some point. And I will, but I'll have to do quite a bit of hard work with the timelines. I've got to recalculate dates and stuff, and unfortunately that also means that certain references have to be deleted and stuff because they're not relevant. But generally speaking, organised chaos is my writing style.
And so that's actually a very healthy kind of attitude, because you're right. I do run into people all the time who are like, yeah, I had this cool idea for a book and I got like 10,000 words in and nothing was clicking and stuff like that. But I do like the attitude of like, no, it will work one day and you'll go back to it, and you have gone back to it and then finish. And I think especially if somebody's listening to this right now and you're just kind of starting out, you're going to learn a lot more from finishing stories or books, even when you know, hey, this doesn't work, or you don't like it or you don't believe in this kind of project or nothing like this, you're going to learn a lot more by finishing stuff than by trying to start over again. Even if it's just about like yourself, it trains your brain to actually learn how to push through the new and exciting thing and turn it into work, and then it'll come back to being fun once it's finished, and you can kind of, enjoy those $1 million advance checks that are totally going to come to you for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a famous author, and I can never remember his name. I really do have to do some research and find out who said this, but he basically said that you need, in order to be successful, you need to have 300,000 words that you've deleted. And I mean, by deleted, we mean just left in a drawer on your hard drive and never clean. And that's 3 books. You need to have written 300,000 words before you're ready to write properly. And I think, if you take it up with big caveats and as a bit of a generalization, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, my hard drive is littered with fragments of stuff I started. I've been writing since I was a kid. My mum recently found a whole load of old exercise books that I purloined from school and filled with stories. And I'd always set off with great enthusiasm, and I'd never finish. And I'd sometimes get distracted by drawing a nice cover and things like that. I don't do that anymore. I don't draw covers anymore. But then I continued that through university. And it was just stuff ticking away in the background. And in fact, what actually got me to eventually start the Warren Jones series was that I was writing speculative fiction, actually, at the time. I was a big sci-fi fan. And I got a book I was writing about the first journey to Mars, which has in many ways been overtaken by contemporary events. But this was back in the mid-2000s. And I got to 60 or 70,000 words, which is a big chunk. But I had writer's block. But the one bit of the book I didn't have writer's block on was one of the sub-threads. So basically, I was writing about it was going to be very prestigious to be on this first journey to Mars, and lots of countries obviously wanted to have their astronauts on there, and there was a fair bit of skullduggery trying to get your astronaut onto this ship. There's only taking 6 people,
Yeah.
And one of those threads involves a murder mystery. They kill someone. Oh, wow. And I realised that I just kept on going back to that and rewriting it but to the detriment of everything else. And when finally I remember it was New Year's Eve. I was trying to write on the New Year's Eve, and I'd had this real sort of ground to a halt writer's block. And I thought, somebody's trying to tell me something here. And that was when I had the idea for what became The Last Straw, which is the first of the Warren Jones books. You can just see it up here. And I had the ideas for that and thought, oh, this is what I'm going to write. Clearly, this is what I want to write. And by this point, I was reading far more crime fiction anyway than speculative fiction. Just we had a very good library, and I was, that was what I gravitated towards. And I had that period of a couple of months where I was casting around ideas and trying to develop Warren Jones as a character that we've already spoken about. And then eventually it was just like, right, okay, this is what I need to write. And so I sat down and I wrote it relatively quickly. I started it one Easter, and I remember I was bane of school teachers' lives. We were marking, and at the time, we don't do it anymore. They used to do some coursework for GCSE science, and the big marking deadline for that was over the Easter holidays. And myself and another colleague, a guy called Tom Spencer, had come in to school that day over the holidays because it was easier for us to spread our stuff out in the classroom and work together when we were marking his coursework. And I just said to him, I said, do you fancy being in a book? And he went, yeah, all right. And Tom Spencer was the character we meet in the prologue.
Oh, nice.
That's how I got his name, because I'm not normally very good at coming up with names. But I thought, oh, he's Tom. He and I have been sitting there for 3 days marking.
It's very fun what you're talking about, where, because I think this is quite true if anyone's been like a long-time writer, where the good ideas really tend to stick around, or at least boomerang their way back to you. Yeah. And I think every writer who's starting off will have like a notebook full of bad ideas that the reason they write them down is because they forget about them and they probably weren't worth remembering a lot, which is normal.
Yeah.
But the ones that keep coming back to you, I think those have a lot more value than I think what some people might count. Well, yeah, so that was a really good chunk of stuff here. But we need to get to this author fight. We need to actually debate on who is going to be reigning supreme, who's going to be wearing this championship belt of heavyweight murder mystery writers. Let me introduce kind of how the rules are going to go. Round one is just going to be the introduction rounds. Like, we're going to find out who we are championing and why we know their name and why we love their work. Round two is going to be any and all adaptations and stuff like that that's out in the world. And then round three is just overall cultural impact. So, introducing the blue corner over there, Paul, who is your champion for today?
Michael Connelly. Now, already mentioned him. Okay. Michael Connelly, for the last 30 years or so, has been writing the Harry Bosch series of detective novels set in Los Angeles. His key character is a guy called Hieronymus Bosch. That was what he was named, but unknown obviously as Harry to everybody. And that series has been going on for 30 years. However, there is adjacent series as well. A few years after he started, he introduced a fantastic character, Mickey Haller, known as the Lincoln Lawyer. You may have seen that on Netflix. The books are fantastic. I actually, at Crime Fest last year, which is in fact starting next week for this year, I did Mastermind, where my specialist subject was the Lincoln Lawyer novels. Absolutely fantastic. So he is typically a defense attorney. Occasionally he is crossed over to prosecution for various books. He is also Harry Bosch's half-brother. So, in fact, Michael Connelly now has what some refer to as a Connelly-verse, which is where he has these characters that come in and out of each other's books, like a shared history. Like a bit like the Marvel comic universe, but with less spandex. And he's also, because he ages his characters in real time, and Harry's now 70ish. He was a Vietnam vet in the books. He's now also been supported by a young female detective called Renee Ballard, who I'm told will also get her own spin-off TV series. So Harry Bosch, so simply Bosch on Amazon and Bosch Legacy, been going for 10 years now. And Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix. 2 seasons have aired, and I believe the third one is in production. And Renee Ballard apparently will have cameos from Harry Bosch. So
awesome, cool. Yeah. So that's introducing, like I said, the blue corner there. We have Michael Connelly over there. Now we're going to go over here to the red corner. We're introducing my champion. With over 53 novels, countless adaptations, and one incredibly mustachioed protagonist, I, of course, am choosing Agatha Christie. She is what could be considered a godmother of the genre. And it's just one of those, she's a very good introduction to the genre, I think, especially if you're going to hand stuff out to kids who are more mature readers.
I think she is a natural progression from kids who have exhausted, first of all, Enid Blyton's, and then Enid Blyton's wonderful because they go through all of the different stages of reading. I hadn't tweaked until recently that actually the different series are aimed at different age groups. Then I've got perhaps done, and this is the route I would have taken, obviously, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, those, and they're now looking for something that is on the adult shelf, but because of the time she was writing, doesn't yet have mature adult themes. So it's safe to give to a kid who's a confident reader, but the adult themes you might be concerned about. So she's not young adult, but suitable for young adult, I think.
Exactly. Good. All right. Well, that takes care of round one. We have our corners filled. We have our champions ready to go. And so that's round one. So now we're going to move on to round two, which you've already kind of touched on a bit, which is, of course, adaptations. So like you said, stuff like Lincoln Lawyer and the other ones that you mentioned there. Why do you think people enjoy these kinds of stories for so long? Like, what is it about these characters or the elements of these mysteries that people seem to really, really enjoy and keep coming back to, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, the Connelly verse, we'll call it that for the time being.
Sure.
It's remarkable. So a little bit of context here. Harry Bosch was one of the first streaming detective shows on Amazon, an Amazon original. Okay, and the way they did it was they actually smushed together 3 novels and took elements of each. They brought Harry forward in time. So in the TV series, he is a Gulf War veteran, as opposed to a Vietnam veteran for the books. And so Titus Welliver, who portrays him, is in his, Harry's in his 50s, 40s, 50s. They're not that clear on the age, obviously, as opposed to the books where Harry's now into his 70s. Now, what's really interesting is that it was done as a pitch. They basically pitched 3 pilots and showed them on Amazon and asked people to vote. And Harry Bosch was the one that won, if you like. It's now been going. They did 7 seasons of Bosch, and then they moved on, and they're now filming the 3rd season of Bosch Legacy, which is where his daughter Madeline, who has grown up through those series, is now a rookie cop herself. And there are some divergences from the books, but I don't mind, because actually, in my mind, Harry, the TV character, and Harry, the book character, can be viewed as 2 separate pieces of art. And I enjoy them both equally. I love watching Bosch TV series, and I'm always waiting for the next Michael Connelly book. And the reason I think they're so successful is, first of all, they got a very good casting. And Titus Welliver's really, really taken Harry to heart. He's willing to come back for spin-offs for Harry for the René Ballard series. He's agreed to do this legacy series. He doesn't want to let go of the character, and that's very clear. He's now an executive producer on the show. Michael Connelly has always been an executive producer, which is really useful. Authors aren't always the best person to advise on their books. They're not the best person to adapt them sometimes, because it's hard to pull out stuff and rewrite stuff.
To translate the medium, sure, exactly. Always has like its challenges that maybe authors don't quite get, and the vice versa happens as well with like executives.
Yeah, he doesn't adapt them, but he executive produces them, and he's heavily involved. He's looking at social media, you'll see him quite often on set with the actors and stuff. And because of that, it works really, really well. Now, Netflix picked up the rights for The Lincoln Lawyer. Now, there had been a film adaptation with Matthew McConaughey, which is very good, actually. We watched it a couple of years back and thoroughly enjoyed it. But they did the Brass Verdict as the first season. Now, again, they've changed things around and stuff to make the Brass Verdict ideal for doing a start of a series. The problem they got, though, of course, is that Netflix owns the Lincoln Lawyer, and Amazon owns Harry Bosch.
Yeah.
They're half brothers, and there can be issues there, because particularly some of the later books, they've started working together. So what they've done is they've had to give those parts of the story, if you like, to different characters. But you know what? It's worked. And in fact, I like the divergence from the source material, because I can now enjoy them as 2 entirely separate art forms. I get twice the money, twice from a book.
There you go. Yeah.
Sometimes some things are slavish readaptations of a novel. And so actually, if you're going to watch the TV and you've already read the novel, you know exactly what's going to happen, and you know beat by beat, and you judge. You're saying, I don't know, I wouldn't do it that way. I think that character would work. And that's fine for Harry Potter. I mean, there were slavish adaptations of that book, those books, and they work really, really well. But for a lot of things, it doesn't work. And so by actually freeing them from those constraints, you can enjoy them entirely differently, which I absolutely love. And that's why. And why have they been so popular for so long? Because these books just get better and better as they go along. There is incredible source material that they're working
Mm-hmm.
from. There's just no getting around it. Okay, they're not having to take a source material and say, right, okay, there's a germ of a good idea and let's do something with it. No. They're taking something that's already very, very good and saying, right, okay, what can we do with this?
So that's adaptations for Michael Connelly there. Now I want to move on to adaptations for Agatha Christie. Specifically, I want to do the Hercule Poirot adaptations. And because the reason I bring that up is because there have been 2 or 3 recent like film adaptations with Kenneth Branagh.
No, Kenneth Branagh. Yes, with his
Kenneth Branagh as Poirot there. And so I think those movies are incredibly well produced. I think they're shot in a unique way. The only genuine flaw, and I think this is kind of a flaw a little bit in mysteries, is if something is so popular as Agatha Christie's books are, and they've been around as long as Agatha Christie's are, most people know how the story ends. They know who the murderer is. They know how the mystery is. And I think that takes away from the experience. Like, specifically like with the Murder on the Orient Express, that's nearly, 100-year-old book. And, I don't want to spoil it just because I don't want to be that kind of person. But I knew how that story ended from like 6th grade. Because I had read it for so long, and
in its time, but
and so like I said, it's one of those things where, yes, it could have a huge cultural impact at the time. It can actually last a while, but I think there's a shelf life for mysteries. But like, if something gets big,
and a cultural impact that is
there, you go. That's a way better phrasing.
Beyond. Yeah, I mean, it's. Like you say, people often know the end of the Orient Express. They may not even have known it was Agatha Christie on the Orient Express, but because it's such a good idea, and like I said, we're not giving spoilers away. The such a clever twist. When she first did it 100 years ago, nobody saw it coming.
Yeah. But
since then, other people have done their own variations on it, and there are those who will sit there and go, okay, yeah, I can see where this is going. But that's because 100 years of cultural impact and legacy. And I think something as well, which I don't know how much you saw this, Cooper, because obviously you were brought up in the US, but in the UK, particularly people of a certain generation, we had seen an awful lot of the Poirots and Miss Marple on television. So there was a guy called David Suchet who did a fantastic, and it was Sunday night. ITV would produce these shows. And they do them each year. They do several of them on a Sunday evening, little block, series, latest Poirot series, and there'll be several of the books. And because of that, a lot of us are actually already familiar with the stories in that respect. And in many ways as well, we're also comparing the characters. I mean, Miss Marple, who of course is her other very famous creation, has been played by several women over the years. But for people my age and older, there's only one Miss Marple, and I'm very sorry to the actors who later tried to portray her. But no, that's not who I'm picturing. I'm afraid.
You're not my real mom, right?
No,
you're not my real mom.
I watched her as a child in the 80s and 90s. That was my Miss Marple, and anyone taking over Poirot has a similar issue. David Suchet just playing for so many years, so they're fighting an uphill battle there, and I think the films have done better than perhaps they could have done. So
definitely cool. Well, that takes care of round number 2 right there. Last round here.
I could have gone in swinging, shouldn't I? Really? Could have been really.
But it's okay.
But remember, criticise Agatha Christie. They'll throw me out the Crime Writers Association.
But it's old school versus new school. Like I said, But that's cool. But so now we're going to go into our final round here. Round 3 of just overall cultural impact. So in your opinion, what do you think is Michael Connelly's, whenever he's finally done writing, as most mortals will be, what do you think his overall cultural impact is going to be? Like, what's his legacy going to be out there?
I think his legacy. So first of all, there will be a huge backlog of very, very good crime novels. I mean, exceptionally well written crime novels. when I did Mastermind last year, I had to go back and reread all the Lincoln lawyer novels in preparation. And there's about 8 of them. If you depends how you define. There's a couple of probably more likely Harry Bosch novels, but I read them for completeness. And so the first books, they're 20 odd years old, and they still stand up. And yeah, okay. I mean, like when you're watching old episodes of Frasier, and Niles has got his mobile phone out and his address book. And you think, but actually, Frasier still works. You forget that, you ignore those tiny little bits. And my wife and I binge watched Frasier for the first time recently, and we were saying this still works. This still works. Nearly 30 years on, and I think that's what they'll have. Those books will still be damn good books, and it may be if you're reading them in 30 years' time, you just merely have to look at the time they were written. And accept that as for the cultural references. But what he's also done though is he's not afraid of looking at really controversial contemporary topics. The first Harry books were set very shortly after the Rodney King riots in LA in '92. And the impact of those goes through the books. I mean, they still occasionally get referenced if relevant in later books, because Harry was on duty. Harry was a working police officer at that time.
Yeah,
and each book will actually be a snapshot of what's going on. I mean, he didn't shy away from COVID. He in the latest books, there's a Renee Ballard book. Just written, I think, about 3 years ago, and she's pulling up to a homeless encampment, which was a big issue in LA at the time, and putting a mask on because half these people are COVID because it was a bit of a disaster in LA in homeless communities. Mm-hmm. He hasn't shied away from that. And what was always funny is that Harry retires in the books because he's got to compulsory retirement age effectively, but he actually fought it and sued the LA that they couldn't just fire him because he's old, and he comes back, and he also does cold cases and stuff, and I think that's really clever, and it's resonated. At one point, Michael Connelly was invited to see the class latest graduation class for the LAPD, and Harry Bosch was thanked for all the hard work he's done for LA over the years. I thought it was quite amusing. So I think he will have a very big cultural impact, both from the skill of a damn good story, but also its snapshots into social history at that time.
Sure. Very cool. Very insightful for round 3. So now overall cultural impact for Agatha Christie. My big argument with this is that the impact has kind of already happened. We're now kind of living in the aftermath of this meteorite that kind of hit the genre decades ago. And the thing is, with any kind of major success in any genre, there's initially going to be copycats, but then there's going to be people who are building on top of the genre and doing new things like the author did. And I think that is kind of the overall cultural impact of Agatha Christie, beyond characters like Poirot, or the books like And Then There Were None, or all the other ones that she's done there. Because there's
saw the play of that, by the way, just very recently in Birmingham, very very good. And Then There Were None.
Yeah. So my point being is that
before I went in either, which was
yeah. And so my point being is that in the world that we live in now, we're still kind of living in the aftermath of this cultural impact. But so it's one of those things where that's how I really measure impact on a culture, is how long it lasts. And like I said before, it's kind of starting, I wouldn't say fizzling out, but people are getting used to it, of the initial stuff here. But like I said, the genre is growing because of people like Agatha Christie. And it's only going to, I think, we're going to see remnants of this for probably generations to come. So that's kind of my big argument.
Can I disagree slightly?
Ooh, please, go ahead.
No, I think whilst you agree, she's become embedded in the culture. Okay, so obviously in that respect, I think you're absolutely right. But it's worth pointing out that there is still an appetite. I mean, Sophie Hannah's written several Poirot continuation novels at the behest of the Agatha Christie estate, and they've been bestsellers.
Okay.
Anthony Horowitz has written a couple as well. Again, bestsellers. There are obviously the film adaptations. I mean, the latest ones. I mean, you know, I think they were very well produced. How well they performed at the box office is very difficult, actually. I think because they were released around the COVID time, so there's issues there with gauging box office success. I think those books, her stories, are being reinterpreted again. Now, part of that is the Agatha Christie estate is an incredible business. I mean, it's run by her grandchildren now, and they're determined to screw out every penny, and fair play. But I think she's not going anywhere, and I think that's the thing. I mean, recently, a very well-known author whom I'm very, very fond of, a good friend, she's not allowed to refer to herself as the Queen of Crime, because that is actually a trademark for Agatha Christie.
Is it? Oh,
yeah. Now all of us.
That's really cool.
So therefore, where possible, we refer to our friend as the Queen of Crime, just to say we.
Teaser.
Sorry, I really don't like that idea that they trademark that descriptor. I think that's just silly.
I think they need to start going down the ranks. So like we have the Queen of Crime, then we're having Princess, then Duchess, and then what's another one?
I'm not naming it just because I have
Baroness. A couple Baronesses.
I don't know what her views are on this debate. But let's just say that to us, she will always be our queen.
Cool. Well, that's a great place to kind of wrap things up here. Okay, so of course, Paul, you are the winner of this episode of Author Fight in the genre of mysteries. Yes,
I'll take that.
All around.
A worthy opponent.
Absolutely. All right, well, Paul, before we wrap up things here, where can people find your stuff?
So, the Warren Jones series, they are all available, of course, on Amazon. So there are 9 full-length novels, and they are available, obviously, ebook, paperback, and audio. I have a fantastic audio narrator called Mark Williams, who's really done good work with these. There are 4 novellas. Now, they are just ebook only, because obviously it's just not worth turning to paperback. But they're available through online ebook sellers as well. If you visit my website, paulgitsham.com, then there is a free Warren Jones short story, Papering Over the Cracks. It was a short story I wrote that it was after I'd written the first couple of Warren Jones novels, but before they hit the shelves. So technically, this was the first Warren Jones story ever written, ever published. Came in an anthology for a local writers group. I then rewrote it a few years back during COVID because the original anthology had quite a strict word limit. I just didn't feel like it had enough room to breathe. But that's free if you want to just have a look at that and see if you like my writing style. I think that's the most important thing. That's the great thing about the novellas as well. You can tell if you like my writing style. Going forward, and this is the first time it has been mentioned, there will be a new standalone novel that is moving away from the police procedural slightly. It's going to be a domestic thriller. Now, I can't say any more. I haven't got a title. Well, I have a title, but we're deciding whether it's the best title. I'm currently getting the cover design and stuff at the moment, so I'm not in a position to announce any more details, but it should be coming out before the end of the year. So that will be my first standalone, and like I said, more domestic thriller rather than police procedural. So you heard it here first. This is your
big scoops on Beyond the Manuscripts here. Well, of course, all the links to everything that Paul just mentioned there is, of course, going to be in the description down below. So please go check out his stuff. Go check out his website. Yeah.
Sign up to my
Sign up for his newsletter. Of course, please sign up for the newsletter. And that's going to do it this week for this episode of Beyond the Manuscript, which of course is brought to you by Manuscripts, where you never write alone. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and share buttons, all the things that help us do what we do here and keeps us talking about books that you love, folks. Let us know in the comments down below who your favorite mystery author is. Do you agree that it should be Michael Connelly, Agatha Christie, or someone else entirely? And I want to thank my guest one more time, Paul Gitsham, for coming on to the show.
Thank you again, Paul.
Been a blast. Yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Yeah, and I'll see you next time.